Professional scuba diving comes with a lot of risks, and every now and then a disaster is bound to happen. Now, can you imagine being sucked into an underwater oil pipe in complete darkness before you even knew what was happening? Well, that's exactly what happened to these 5 divers right here. Today we're going over the Paria diving incident, the stories from the lone survivor, and breaking down one of the biggest diving disasters in recent history. This incident started on February 25th, 2022, but the final report on the incident just recently came out. This whole situation takes place off the island of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. These 5 divers were tasked with working on an oil pipeline for Paria fuel. They were going in to work on a U-shaped section of the pipe. This area was used to deliver oil from a ship to a refinery 400 yards away. The station on the left was called Berth 6, and on the right was Berth 5. These divers were doing maintenance work on Berth 6. Now, working on this pipe was very dangerous and required a ton of innovation. To be able to do this, they used a special habitat bell over the top to be able to work while dry. It's an 8-foot by 8-foot cube structure that went over the top of the pipe. In the past, it had worked great, but today was not like any other day. This right here is actual footage from the dive. Once divers were inside, they were able to remove their equipment and begin their work on the pipe. Their first task was to remove an air plug that prevented hydrocarbons from escaping the oil pipeline.
Wait, are they inside the pipe working?
However, as soon as this valve was opened, an incredibly strong force pulled the divers and all of their equipment into the pipe. That's right, all the way down into the oil pipeline. This was so unexpected, and the men were unprepared for this to happen. So before they even knew what happened, they were sucked into an oil pipeline by a tornado of rushing water. After such an unlucky turn of events, they were fortunate enough to find themselves in an air pocket inside the pipe. Without knowing where in the pipe exactly they were, which direction was which, and what exactly just happened, they started calling names and realized they were all alive and together.
Oh my god.
Now, the air that was allowing them to breathe was actually the reason they got sucked down into the pipe. Wait, so how did a disaster like this actually happen? Well, there was supposed to be 1,200 gallons of oil inside the pipe, but since there was less, an air pocket formed right underneath the plug they were tasked with removing. This caused an insane balance difference between the pressure up top and the pressure inside the pipe. So when they actually did remove the plug, that caused everything in the chamber to be sucked down into the pipe. It's one of the craziest diving incidents in history. Eventually, the rushing water stopped, and after taking inventory of the crew, they realized they were completely disoriented. The only way out would be to go through Berth 6 where they came from, as Berth 5 would have no way to escape. And not knowing which direction is which, it's a 50-50 shot on which way is correct. As you can guess, many of the divers did have broken bones by this point. They talked and tried to start moving in the direction they believed was Berth 6. Now, this pipeline had variations in elevation which allowed air pockets to form. They eventually got head to toe with each other and slugged through the thick oil and water.
Dude, being the last guy, oh my god. If you're the last guy of the 6, dude, like, no, being directly in the middle would be 10 times worse.
Catching their breath in every air pocket. Eventually though, they were moving too slow and some of the injuries were too severe. So the 2 men in the very front of the group decided to leave the rest behind to try to find a way out. The 3 men in the back were very wounded and the plan was to break out and send a rescue for them in the near future. As the first 2 guys were moving, they eventually reached another air pocket, and this is where they discovered their scuba equipment. Everything was still in order, and this allowed them to move closer to one of the end points. After nearly 2 more hours, the second man's injuries were just too severe, so they both decided that the man in the very front should go on without the second. After using what little air remained in his scuba tank, he reached the beginning of one of the berth stations. This is what he said to be the most terrifying part, not knowing if this was Berth 5 or Berth 6. If it was Berth 5, he would have almost certainly been doomed. But eventually he swam the full 60 feet to the top, where he realized that he made it to the top of Berth 6, the correct
Oh my
station.
God.
He started banging on the sides to get the attention of the rest of the crew, who eventually showed up and got him out of the pipe. The man told rescuers that the rest were alive and surviving in air pockets throughout the pipe. He was taken to the hospital where he would go on to be the only survivor. Eventually, rescuers went diving around the pipe though, where they could hear tapping sounds from inside. But strangely enough, no rescue was attempted for the 4 other men. There is much debate over the response by the oil company and the Coast Guard, as many feel that a rescue should have at least been attempted and was very well possible, as the men were only a few hundred feet from safety.
Dude, that's messed up. This is like if somebody heard the Byford Dolphin incident and was like, let me make that incident a million times worse and a million times more terrifying. Also, why would you design a pipe like this? Like, this just seems like a terrible way to design a pipe. It's like you're asking for something bad to happen. You could definitely curve this part of the pipe, right?
Tornado, everything just spinning and beating you up and tapping so fast. I couldn't react. The only thing I remember able to do was cover my head, like in the fetal position. After that, all I remember, I didn't even remember actually getting pulled in the pipe. I just remember going hurled through the pipe at unbelievable speeds. I couldn't hold my breath no longer, man. Throat. And you're holding your breath for too long, after a while, your body, your lungs just fight. Yeah, waist closed, you see a noise.
Oh, man. Why would they make the pipe 30 inches? Like, don't even make the pipe big enough for humans, right? Like, either make it big enough to where, like, somebody can survive in there, or make it too small for somebody to get pulled in. Don't make it, like, just big enough for people to, like, suffer.
An unbelievable nightmare. Your eyes burning. Every time you try to open your eyes, it's burning. You're pitch black, you can't see nothing. Your throat burning. Your ears ringing. Your body sore. And at that point, I tell myself I was going to end dead.
Their struggle.
Bro, that is an unbelievably traumatizing experience. It's crazy that he can talk about it like that, because if this happened to me, I'd never be able to talk about it.
For survival was only beginning. The men were trapped inside a 1,200-foot-long oil pipe, disoriented, injured, and in absolute terror. Amidst this chaos and fear, the men tried to communicate and keep each other's spirits up. However, the reality of their situation squashed down any hope of survival. In front of oxygen tanks with the regulator, hoping he would find another air pocket soon. The entire pipe had flooded sections, and some contained air pockets. After fighting to make his way underwater, he realized his oxygen.
Like, could they not have just... Can't you just like drill a hole? I feel like they could have drilled a hole in this pipe, wherever the air socket was. Couldn't they have just drilled a hole and like pumped air into there? Like, give them ventilation, you know what I mean? If you can swim down to where you can hear them tapping on the pipe, why not just... You don't have to cut the pipe, right? I understand that the company didn't want to cut the pipe because that probably would have cost them like millions of dollars. But at the very least, you could probably drill a hole in it and then use that hole to like give them fresh air.
Oxygen was running out based on his air quality. With his diving instincts in overdrive, he breathed the last air in his tank. As if fate intervened, his tank collided with another metal object before him. It was another oxygen tank. He quickly tried to find the new tank's regulator. After scrambling in pitch black, he finally found it, but the regulator had no mouthpiece, so he pushed the whole thing in his mouth. His mouth was covered in oily sludge. He managed to take a relieved breath from the tank. He knew he couldn't stop and continued with all his strength, uncertain how long he could survive. As he clambered through the pipe, he finally entered another air pocket. Yet, instinctively, he knew his only escape was returning to the riser. Unfortunately, this section of the pipe was half full of water. he found another air tank and reached the last flooded section before the riser. At this time, he heard Faisal calling out his name. He had been following Chris. He asked Chris to wait before he entered the last flooded section, but Chris told him he couldn't wait any longer. They had been in the pipe too long, and that their time was running out. He continued until he found the bend in the pipe that he hoped would lead to salvation. After what seemed like hours, this next decision would decide his fate. This was the moment of truth. Either this was berth 5, which was sealed off by a plug, or this was berth 6, where they came from. As he made up his mind for the third time to die, with one last push of determination, he kicked off towards the riser. As Chris continued to swim, he realized how tired he was, but he was determined to make it out and save his crew. Chris eventually reached the top of the pipe. Though he survived the ordeal, it wasn't over yet. As Christopher recounted the situation to the medical care staff, he recounted as many details as possible about the men and their position. Unfortunately, the rest of the LMCS team couldn't believe Christopher's story. The company assumed that the pipeline was full of oil and that any oxygen tanks they had would only give them an hour of air each. Rescue divers from the LMCS team dove down and knocked on the pipe, trying to find where the men were. They received the satisfying sounds of someone knocking back, undoubtedly providing the trapped men hope. But the LMCS team had yet to find a way to get them out. As the hours ticked by, the 4 injured divers suffered through their injuries, dealing with dwindling air, a curtain of suffocating oil fumes, rising seawater, and carbon dioxide. Though it seemed that Pariah Trading Company and LMCS would initially save the 4 men, a rescue never came. The company pulled the 4 remaining bodies days after the incident began. They performed autopsies, but no one could agree on when each man died. Officials decided they survived until Saturday, but some speculated that one endured until Monday. Officials launched a commission of inquiry in Trinidad and Tobago to investigate the circumstances.
Alright, so that is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and comment, and please also subscribe. That's all I got for now. I'm out.